Okay, so let's now talk about the occipital bone. Let's orient you. Okay, this is a superior view. So we're looking at the top of the patient's head, and the occiput is right back here. Okay, that's where the occiput is. And now let's look at some of the big landmarks that you're going to have to know. Here's the base occiput. So that's the most anterior or ventral aspect of the occiput. And you need to know what the base occiput is doing in both flexion and extension. Here's the occipital condyles right here. Here's a foramen magnum, and that's where the spinal cord comes through the occiput and to connect with the brain. And here's the occipital squama. So that's a good start. Okay, so let's switch from a superior view and let's move. So now that we're looking at a posterior view. So this is if you're looking at someone who's standing or sitting and you're looking right behind them. We're back to a superior view of the occipital bone. Let's get you some of the landmarks. Here's the base occiput. There's the foramen magnum, which the spinal cord comes through. And there's the occipital squama. Now, in the vault hold, your fifth digits or your pinkies are going to be palpating or contacting that occipital squama. Now, during flexion, what is going to happen is the base occiput is going to move superior or towards you. You're sitting with a patient in front of you, and it's going to move towards you. And the occipital squama is going to move inferior and towards the feet. So let's watch what happens during flexion. See that occipital base occiput come right back into you? And then during extension, the base occiput is going to move towards the feet, and the occipital squama is going to move towards you, sitting right behind the patient. There you go. Flexion, base occiput moves superiorly, occipital squama moves inferiorly. Extension, base occiput moves inferiorly, and occipital squama move superiorly. So now let's take the occiput, and we're looking at a superior view, and let's change this to a lateral view. So now we're looking at it from the patient's right side. And let's just go over some of the landmarks here. Here's the base occiput. This is the occipital condyle. And here's the occipital squama right here. And this is where your fifth digit is going to be, or your pinky finger. Okay? And now let's go over the movement that you're going to feel in flexion extension and how you're going to see that from a lateral aspect. Okay, so let's talk about axes, planes, and how the movement you're going to see it from a lateral perspective. First of all, the axis, okay, is going to be a transverse axis. All right, so let's put our axis right there. Okay, it's going to be right above the foramen magnum of the occiput, and our plane, right? Our plane, our two-dimensional plane, is going to be a sagittal plane. So just the same as if you looked at this sphenoid plane, this is going to be a sagittal plane for flexion and extension. And what's it going to look like? During flexion, the base occiput is going to move superiorly, and the occipital squama is going to move inferiorly. So here's flexion. Now during extension, it's going to be the exact opposite. During extension, what's going to happen is the base occiput is going to move inferiorly towards the feet, and the occipital squama is going to move superior towards you, or towards the head of the patient. And you're going to feel that in your pinky or your fifth digit. You're going to feel that move superiorly, right? So you see the base occiput move inferiorly, and then you can see the occipital squama move superiorly. Great. So now let's focus in on the axis and the plane for the occiput in both flexion and extension. All right, so let's grab the plane. Here we go. Let's bring that plane down, and we need to make it a sagittal plane. Here we go. Let's make it a sagittal plane. And what that's going to do is it's going to split the occiput into both a left half and a right half. Now, let's get the axis. This is a transverse axis, and it's going to be located right above foramen magnum. And what you're going to see is during flexion, you're going to see the basi-occiput move superiorly, occipital squama move inferiorly. There we go. You see that basi-occiput move superiorly, occipital squama inferiorly down towards the feet. Now, during extension, you're going to see the basi-occiput move inferiorly and the occipital squama move superiorly. And there you go. Good. So hopefully that really focuses that in a laser beam for you. Further solidify in your mind axes, planes for the occipital bone, and we're going to change it from a lateral view to now we're into the superior view. So we're sitting in a vault hold looking at the top of the patient's head. All right. What does that plane look like? Well, it's a sagittal plane, so let's change that to sagittal, and let's bring it here. It's going to split that occiput into left and right halves. Okay, there's your sagittal plane. So it's going to be around a transverse axis. Let's make a transverse axis. Here we go. We're going to bring it over here, and there we have it. We've got the occiput moving into flexion extension. It's moving in a sagittal plane around a transverse axis. Beautiful.